And I was just thinking, if a guy came into a neighborhood in the city and like blew out everybody's power, like they're gonna come out wanting to like fight this guy.
Totally.
Like I was just trying to watch Netflix upstairs, man. What's the deal? Welcome to our show. I'm Dan, this is Aaron, and we like to talk about movies. Today we're going to be talking about Samaritan, starring Sylvester Stallone, Javon Walton, and Pilou Asbaek, and is currently streaming on Prime Video. What was your gut reaction to Samaritan?
Gut reaction. So close, I think, would probably be how I describe this movie. It was, there were a lot of great moving parts. I don't think they all mesh together.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like you have all these little things. You have like Pilou Asbaek, dude's a great villain, so you kind of can't go wrong there. It doesn't really matter if you write him well or not. It's not ever going to get old watching Sylvester Stallone beat people up, so that's cool.
We've been watching him do it for a long time.
Right. It makes me think of Rocky Balboa. Just seeing him as an older Rocky, it was cool seeing him as like almost like a grandpa. And I like how that sort of translates into this movie because I like that he's this character that's like, he's got a lot of experience under his belt. Yeah, it had this grit to it that I thought was cool. It's hard to say, but it's just, I like watching a superhero movie that's not one of the things I'm already familiar with. So sure, give it a shot, develop a new mythology. But then, you know, that was one of the things where I'm like, you could have done a lot with this and you kind of didn't really do a whole lot. You did just a little bit. But anyway, that's my rambly general take. I'd be curious to just turn that right back around and say, what was your gut reaction, Dan?
Surprisingly similar to yours.
Yeah.
I came up with the same, you know, it's not what I could call a great movie, but there are things that it does right that I like. I feel like it had a lot of heart. I thought some of the same things with Stallone and sort of some Rocky, you know, with his stocking cap going along in the cold weather, like that very down to earth, you know, gritty type. I really liked that. The texture of the movie in general, you mentioned it had some grit, like the sets and just the lived-in-ness of the world felt very believable. I was going to mention one thing that I really liked about it that I don't know if maybe a lot of people didn't notice is the cars that Cyrus's gang drives.
Yes.
They were chosen very excellently.
Yeah?
A lot of times movies have just, you can tell that like a company paid to have their cars put in and they don't really fit. I won't name any names. But I feel like
Ford, GM, Chevrolet, I think are some of the companies he's referring to.
I was going to name specific movies where, you know, I don't know that Bumblebee had to be a Camaro. But,
no.
You know, it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure they sold a lot of Camaros because of that.
I do want to give everyone the benefit of understanding that Dan is a car guy, Aaron is not. So he's got more expertise in this case.
And in particular, these being not cars that you would typically think of as being, you know, your typical villain bad guy cars. I think one was either like a 73 or 74 Ford Gran Torino. One was a Ford Ranchero about the same era. And then one I think was an 80s, either Buick Grand National or Buick Regal, which are like super cool cars, but they're not, you know, super popular cars. They're just like a piece of that era. And then for them to just matte black them all out, looks like it was done with a spray can. I thought that was a great selection of vehicles for Cyrus's gang.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny that you bring that up because I also noticed that obviously I'm not as familiar to where I recognized the cars, but when his little mini fleet of these matte, clearly, you know, retro vehicles pulled up, I'm like, dude, yeah, I like that. And it, you know, it's a vibe that I got that, you know, it's like you feel a little bit of like a RoboCop. And I remember in, I'm embarrassed that I cannot call to mind. It's so close. A science fiction movie with Christian Bale and the gun kata and
Equilibrium.
It was a fancy science word. I knew it was, and I couldn't get it. But Equilibrium, like all the cars in that movie, I think it was a whole bunch of the same models of car, but they were all like matted out and made to look more bland than the original. And it's one of those things where it's like that put a little bit of effort and it gives some flavor to something. I liked that. It was a small detail, but I liked it. And
yeah, like they didn't just go to the manufacturers and say, hey, what vehicle would you pay us to put in this movie?
Right.
And then Cyrus is not a guy that's going to be driving, a BMW X5.
Yeah.
He's going to be driving an older model, just something simple, blacked out, looks mean.
Yeah. And I love the idea of making a movie and just being like, oh, let's go get some used cars for like, $1,200 and then we'll just paint them all the same color and it'll be a flat color that won't look normal. There. That's the bad guy's fleet.
It looked sinister.
Yeah. But didn't mean to cut you off. You had more thoughts.
No, I was just going to say, like how you mentioned that it just missed the mark a little bit. And there were just a few things that I felt like they could have done a little better, or maybe a few scenes that just didn't really quite click for me. One of the things that I wish they had done was I felt like through the middle, there was kind of not so much a sense of purpose. It's like, that the kid is trying to figure out if Joe is who he thinks he is. But it just felt more like a series of events happening. Mm-hmm. It's like you have the situation where his mom needs money, but if they had made that more clear of how much money does mom need, when does she need it by, give him like a specific task that he's trying to fulfill, I feel like that would have kept things, kept moving things along in the middle until we get to the final showdown, instead of just, well, here's another day where he is talking to Joe, and now he's talking to Martin Starr.
No, I agree. Yeah, clearly defined stakes.
Yeah, there's not stakes in the middle part.
It's funny because you're reminding me of one of the things that I thought, and this is more of like the up and down, because to that, the, sort of downs of the not having those stakes, like on the up, there's a part where the bad guys, have the mom and the kid, and I was a little scared for them, and I had to give them credit. I'm like, you moved that needle. So many movies completely fail at even moving that needle at all. Then you go to the other stuff and it's kind of blah.
The only other scene that I'm thinking that sticks out to me that didn't quite click for me was when Cyrus goes with a couple of his buddies and they detonate a device that makes a whole block go dark. A bunch of people come out of these buildings, and then he makes a speech and with very little effort somehow rallies them all to his cause and has them chanting his name. And I was just thinking, if a guy came into a neighborhood in the city and like blew out everybody's power, like they're gonna come out wanting to like fight this guy.
Totally.
Like, I was just trying to watch Netflix upstairs, man. What's the deal? Now my power's out and you're down here like beating stuff up with a hammer. Like, I'm not cheering for you, I'm angry. So that part I felt like, for plot reasons, they needed him to be building a following. But in terms of execution, it just felt that's not how people would react.
Right. But damn, he had the Nemesis mask. Don't you understand the deep-seated lore that was not entirely well set up? There was a point when the kid, I think it's even in the trailer, where the kid's like, "You're Samaritan!" And then my gut reaction was, are there no other superheroes in this world? Like, how did you know that just because he has super strength, he must be? And maybe it's a little spoilery to say what happens from there, so I'll just leave that at that. But it was one of those things that made me stop and think, and then it was kind of like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm being too judgmental, I'll let you tell your story. I think if I was trying to be concise about what doesn't work with this movie, I think it was lacking a specific direction, because I think it was trying to do too many things at once, and it could have juggled some of them, but I feel like it should have picked a direction and gone further in it than it did. And, you've got some Shyamalan mystery type stuff happening, but it's only a little bit of it. And then you've got some James Gunn wackiness with some gritty violence, but like not a ton of it. And you've got some more kid-friendly Shazam feeling superhero action movie, but not a ton of it. And I feel like that was probably the big thing, which is the classic criticism. There was this tonal inconsistency. So it was like, these parts are sort of funny, this is a little too serious, and then this part's a little bit cheesy action, and it didn't feel like it all was as cohesive as you'd want it to be. But I just kept thinking of things like, if Stallone's character was a bigger jerk and the kid had to fight harder to get through his defenses to find the human being underneath, it would have felt more earned and I would have liked it better. Because that was one of the things I found a little disappointing, was that like he was almost too, I don't want to say likable, but too gentle. It was like, you know, he was a little bit of a jerk to the kid at first, but only for a couple minutes. And then it was just like, oh, I'll talk to you. Oh, I'll be nice. Oh, you know my secrets now. Okay, I'll teach you some stuff. Okay, I'll open up about stuff I said I didn't want to talk about. And it was sort of like, you know, it's funny, I haven't even seen this movie, but I was thinking of Finding Forrester, where it's like, nah, I want you to be this grumpy, mean old man, where the kid's like, whoa, I think this guy's him. And then you do something to scare the crap out of him. And he's just like terrified, but he can't leave you alone because you're probably the guy I have to find out. And then find some way to either like impress him, surprise him, or just literally sneak inside his apartment or whatever it is, like something that is too far. But then for some weird reason, instead of smashing him, you're suddenly talking to him. Like I wanted something like that, where I felt like that would give so much more weight to his character. And then, you know, you'd even be that much more invested in the kid because you'd be so scared. Like, oh my gosh, what's he going to do to him?
Right. Instead of just being a guy in the neighborhood who doesn't talk a lot.
Right.
If he was a character that the kid is actually afraid of, made me think of in Home Alone, there's the old guy, you know, that he's afraid of. And then after he finally talks to him, he finds out he's a nice guy. Or in The Sandlot, James Earl Jones' character that is, you know, all the kids in the neighborhood just fear this guy.
And they were legendary.
Yes. And then once you get to meet him, you know, he turns out to be a nice guy.
Totally.
Yeah, they could have done a little bit more of that, where this is actually someone that neighborhood kids are afraid of, you know, and then you can sort of find your way to the gentle side.
Yeah, and those are good examples too of even doing it a different way. You could have also, instead of making him aggressively scary, he could be mysteriously scary because he doesn't talk. You don't hear him. He's only ever, you know, he's never a direct interaction. He's always off at a distance, and it's always like, what's he doing? What's all that? But somehow they landed like blandly right in the middle of all of that. And I felt like that was a wasted opportunity. So Julius Avery is the guy who directed this. He also directed Overlord, which I shamelessly wore because I have an Overlord sweatshirt. I bet you don't. And I wanted to theme my, clothing for the event. But anyway, I really liked Overlord. Was super cool action horror movie, and Pilou Asbaek was a villain in that movie as well, and was also awesome as the villain in that movie too. So I would be super curious to know, did he really want this to be a darker, grittier movie that earned an R rating? And it was sort of like, no, let's trim it back, because it had all the stuff there to go that direction. And this, again, referencing James Gunn, like this could have been in the more R-rated territory. Not that it had to be. I think it could have gone any of the directions, but this could have leaned into that and been like, this isn't fun. This is scary, kind of territory that was playing off of all the grime and the crime and all that sort of stuff. But, we'll find out about that, a decade from now when people start writing tell-alls. One of those details, I don't know if you noticed, there was a RoboCop video game that was in the villain's lair. So
I did notice that.
Right. And it was like, it was one of those little winks where it's like, oh, no, there's some shades of RoboCop happening in this movie, so I'm sure. But it was also one of those things where you go like, so was it like the DP thought that would be neat, or was the director like a super fan of RoboCop and like, dude, we have to get the arcade game in the background, or like, it's fun seeing those details because it always makes you wonder like which person in this was the one, obviously the director having final say, but like, was someone adamant like, oh, we got to put it in, or was that just like one of those fun opportunities where you're like, oh, dude, there's a RoboCop game like at the warehouse next door. We got to put it in the shot.
Yeah, I found myself wondering how much of what you see was set dressing versus the natural lived in, like these buildings, like how much of this warehouse that they're shooting in, had the pool table or the arcade game or,
totally
all these things already included.
Yeah. Well, and that was the thing that was funny is as I was watching the movie, I was trying to guess where it was because it wasn't, I wasn't seeing any landmarks that I was familiar with. And I kept going, I'm like, is this like Philadelphia? Like, it's not New York. It's sort of Chicago, sort of St. Louis. And then, of course, when the movie was over and I looked it up, it was in Atlanta. It was like, oh, of course it was in Georgia. Tax credits.
So one thing that I wanted to mention with respect to Javon Walton is that carrying a movie as the lead character is not an easy thing to do. It's a pretty big ask for a kid. I looked it up and I believe he was around 14 years old at the time. I just wanted to say I think he did an admirable job. That's not an easy thing for an actor of any age to do. And
right.
To have done it at that age is impressive. And we'd also just talked, before the show about how we'd seen him in Umbrella Academy. Mm-hmm. And I felt like he did a good job in that also. So I think that young man has a promising future ahead of him should he decide he wants to keep doing this.
Absolutely. Well, and that was the thing that hit me pretty early in the movie was, in Umbrella Academy, he plays this little punk and he's just, you hate him. Like, you're supposed to hate him. And then, eventually not hate him so much. And he did a great job because that's how he came off. And in this movie, he's not like that at all. He's no angel, but he's a very likable kid. He gets along with people. He's nice, and
he likes his mom.
Exactly. And I didn't have any trouble dealing with that, even though my only experience with him was being the bad kid. So it was like, okay, this kid, he's already like figured this job out pretty well. So. Mm-hmm. Good for him, and I hope that he continues in his career because I think that was a thumbs up casting choice.
Yep, agreed.
When Martin Starr first came on screen, it was very like, "Hey, that nerd guy, like perfect." And then I don't feel like they did much of anything with him because it was just like he didn't serve any purpose, and it was cemented so perfectly. By him pointlessly showing up at the end of the movie to stick his head out and say one line or wave or something. And it was just like, oh, you were in the movie. It doesn't matter that you're here now at all in any way and you didn't add anything. Why are you even on camera? Why did they cut to that direction? And that, it's like a ton of bricks. Like, you should have done something with him.
Yeah, it just begs the question, what did they film with him that didn't make it into the final cut? Because surely they utilized him in some capacity that, just didn't make the edit.
Yep. So that was a bit disappointing. Just the general statement, without going into too many details of the way the movie went, I felt like somewhere around the middle to 2/3 of the way through, it just started getting dumber. And then there was just one thing after another where it was like, why did that happen? Well, why didn't he say anything? Is he notice everyone's looking at him? And I just felt like I was doing that every 30 seconds for a certain portion of it. And then that was the thing that kind of killed me where it was like, I felt like he kept a lot of the logic together for a lot of the movie. And then they hit this point where it was just like, dumb movie thing. And yeah, and that list was just getting so long that I wasn't even keeping track anymore. And that was one of the things that bummed me out, where it was like, you didn't, I was hoping you'd been a little bit more, I guess, just logical, because it's not like a big crazy movie. It's kind of a smaller, simpler movie, and yeah, I just felt like it just went kind of down the dumb hole at the end of it.
Right, just those little logic problems do add up. As we've talked about before, sometimes the distance between a good movie and a great movie is lots of little decisions that could have been made differently.
Right. And it's like, you make Back to the Future, then, nobody really cares all that much about those little things because they didn't stop you from loving the movie. But yeah, this one I felt like they started to pile up. I wanted to say that I think they should have worked a little harder to differentiate the costumes for the good guy and the bad guy super people, because there was more than once where I was a little bit like, wait, are those the same? Wait, no, that's the good guy. Oh, okay. And it was just one of those like, why doesn't one of them have a red helmet and the other one has a blue helmet? Like, it just, there could have been one very obvious key detail, but you had these two guys in like metal costumes that looked so close together that it was like, I didn't understand why they didn't just do a little bit of something.
I just wanted to say, the big finale scene in the warehouse with the fire. That's too much fire.
like
that was the skin will be melting off of their body in that room.
Yep.
That whoever was doing the flame effects, was probably the artist was asked to do it to that degree.
No doubt.
I would say most artists do what they are told in that situation, and somebody ordered up a little bit too much fire.
Yep.
But maybe they just wanted to amp up the suspense a little bit more.
Spoilers! This movie has a big twist. The big twist at the end. Surprise.
We can't not talk about it.
Yeah, it was a pretty big deal. Sylvester Stallone isn't the good guy. He's the bad guy. I actually didn't see it coming. I wonder if I wasn't watching critically enough. I even thought the moment was so cheesy. And then when he said, like, you keep calling me the good guy, I'm like, oh, yeah, you director, writer, whatever. I like that. But I thought that was a good twist.
Mm-hmm.
But
I agree.
How about you? How did it come across?
I agree that it was a great twist. Unfortunately, my wife and I predicted it from the intro movie before, setting up the lore before any of the characters have appeared on screen.
Yeah.
At the end of that little setup, we both turned to each other and went, he's going to be Nemesis. And then we spent the entire movie trying to figure out if we were right or not, because, there's enough misdirection. But if you're looking for it, you can see that he's carefully never quite confirming who he is. He's dodging the question. When they gesture towards the logos painted on the dumpster, both of their logos are on there. And he's like, you think I was that guy? So they were very careful not to conclusively say one way or another, just let you assume. So, yeah, I liked the twist.
Like, it was cool how it was able to hide behind grumpy old man. Like, I liked how, because he was just always so surly. Like, not too surly, but he was always just like, non-committal response. Like, he never would directly answer anything for so much of it that was just made it so easy to hide all that stuff without you really thinking about it because he wasn't being clear.
And it also adds more weight to the fact that, as Nemesis, that he kept a scrapbook of all of his brother's exploits, as sort of, is he doing that to remember him? Is he doing it for guilt? At any rate, it's something that's important to him enough that he immediately comes to get it back and does not want that to be taken away from him.
That was one of those things I think was kind of those up moments where you got the sense that it was like, that isn't what you really wanted. You didn't want to kill your brother. Like, despite whatever circumstances made you enemies, like, you didn't want that, and you've been trying to find a way to reconcile it in your head ever since you stopped being the bad guy. So, yeah,
right.
I felt like, that part of it was working.
So the only other thing I wanted to say that I think is spoilery, and that they didn't address in the way I thought they would, how when he's healing, his body heats up, he has to eat ice cream and stuff to cool himself down. Mm-hmm. I thought for sure they were going to reveal that he, through the process of healing his body, inadvertently started the fire that killed their parents. Mm-hmm. I thought that would have been a real tragic, heavy burden on his character. And I wonder if they considered it and maybe thought it was just a little too dark, or if they just didn't think of that. But I thought that would have been kind of a neat thing if it was an accident and he caused it and he's been living with that guilt ever since.
Right. Like the thing that set him on the dark path was this horrible accident. And he's
right.
actually, he's a sympathetic character that dealt with a trauma in the wrong way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was kind of surprised that they didn't go there.
Yeah.
But, you never know what they might have shot and just didn't make it into the final cut. So.
Yeah. It's tough. I'm not even sure what I would say as far as recommending the movie. Definitely a good one to stream on a service you're probably already paying for. So, if you're a big Stallone fan, you should check it out. If you're the sort of person that wants to watch any superhero-based thing that pops up, you'll probably want to check it out.
If you want a superhero-based thing that is not Marvel and DC and is a little bit different flavor, maybe you'll want to check it out.
For sure. There's something there, but it's not a movie I think everyone needs to watch.
I think that's fair.
Yeah. Well, that's all we have time for today, but I hope you enjoyed our little discussion about Samaritan, and we will keep watching movies and talking about them, and hopefully you'll tune into the next one. So we'll see you guys later.
See ya.